many of you enjoy those ethnic feasts?
Yeah.
Those festivals?
Yeah.
Right? We come from the East Coast, and we would often go to the Italian festival, you know, Columbus Day weekend, or when I was growing up, there were the Portuguese ones, and St. Bridget and St. Agnes, and all these saints that, you know, I never heard of, right? But there were festivals, big feasts in their name. And it was pretty cool. But, you know, we were just kind of outsiders visiting. We enjoyed all the fun, but we never got to the meaning of what it was all about. I guess if we'd stayed for the whole thing and been there for the parade, you know, when they hoist the baby Jesus or the saint on the shoulders and have the parade, maybe we would have gotten it as kids and understood what it was all about. But we were kind of outsiders visiting this celebration of a particular ethnic group. But it was fun, you know, the food, of course, funnel cakes. In Rhode Island, they call them doughboys. You know, all the sausages and the Italian festivals. Oh my gosh, the cannolis. You ever had a big cannoli? Oh, those are so good. I could go on and on about the food and the fun at the ethnic festivals. And we've got them here, don't we, in our community with the salsa festivals and that sort of thing. And they're awesome. Well, the time in Jesus' life that I'm going to be talking about here is when he and his people were gathering for one of these ethnic festivals. And it was called the Feast of Tabernacles, also the Feast of Booths. Okay, booths or tabernacles. And a tabernacle is a place where you can live for a short time. And so one of the features of this feast was that the families would build these little huts on their roof or out in their yard somewhere. Instead of staying in their house, they'd spend a lot of time in these booths or tabernacles during this time of the year. And one of the reasons for that is that they wanted to make themselves more aware of God's creation, of all the good things that were outside that God had provided. I mean, isn't it easy just to focus on and look to our little boxes that we live in, and our little car boxes, and our little office boxes from box to box to box, and we kind of keep our eyes ahead and all around us, but we never really look up and out and get the perspective of being in creation. Well, this is one of the reasons for this, because this was a feast of Thanksgiving. When all the harvest had been gathered in, the people would gather for this feast of tabernacles. And they had a really neat perspective of balance in these feasts. They would be thanking God for the blessings, for all the good things they had in their lives and in the world around them, but at the same time they would be asking God to help them and to guide them. And one of the specific things they were asking God for was rain. Because the place where Jesus lived had a very similar climate to this place, in that we need rain here to survive. Now, imagine California without all the water systems, without all the water supplies, with all the pipes and everything. Wouldn't you need rain to survive in Southern California? And that's the way it was in Jesus' time. They needed the rain to survive, for crops to grow and for people to have enough to drink. And so they prayed for rain. And it was said, and it's still believed today, that if during the Feast of Tabernacles, which is late September, early October, if after a long dry summer, if even a little bit of rain fell during the feast, that it was a sign that the rains they really needed at the beginning of the year would come later on. And it's interesting that even with the hostility between the Arabs and the Jews in Israel and Palestine, the Arabs still know when the Feast of Tabernacles is happening for the Jews, and they look and see if the rains come during that time, then they're happy, and they know that rains will come for them as well as for the Jews. You know, because when rain comes, it's non-discriminatory, isn't it? It hits everyone. Kind of like God's grace. And the two big, you know about the basic elements of life, right? There's earth, right? What else? There's air and water, fire. Okay, there's probably more, but I want to stop there. Earth, air, fire, and water. Now, of the four, two of them were very important at the Feast of Tabernacles, and those two were water and fire. Water and fire at the Feast of Tabernacles. And so water, obviously, because they're praying for rain, and they need rain. They want to thank God for the rain that enabled their crops to grow, and they want to pray for rain to come for the next agricultural cycle. And so there were ceremonies around the water, the celebration of water and the prayer for water. Every day during the feast, the priests would dress up in their robes and their garments, and they had all jewels and gilded edges and everything. They'd dress up in their finery, and they'd lead a procession down the hill from the temple to the water source for the city of Jerusalem. They'd be carrying with them these golden pitchers. And they'd take the golden pitchers and they'd dip them in the water at the Gihon spring. And they would say this. They would quote a prophet named Isaiah, who said, "With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation." With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation, as they filled the pitcher up. And then they would climb up the hill, interestingly, through a gate that was called the Water Gate. Not Watergate, the conspiracy, but the Watergate in Jerusalem. And they would go through the Watergate, and they would go all the way up to the highest point where the temple altar was, this square slab of stone with little nubs on the edges where they would burn incense and even sacrifice animals. And they would pour the water on top of the altar, and it would dribble down and touch the earth. And then they would read this text from another prophet, Zechariah 14:8. Zechariah said, "On that day," a day looking in the future, "on that day that we all look forward to, living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half to the eastern sea and half to the western sea, in summer and in winter." Now, this is a place that only has seasonal rain and not too much of it. And what this prophecy said, and what the priest said as they poured the water, they were not only praying for rain for their time, but they were looking for a day off in the future when water would irrigate the land all the time, regardless of the season, and would enable the desert to bloom in all the four seasons that they experienced. And they were looking forward to a day of salvation. They got the water from the well. We're expecting your salvation, God. We're expecting your help. Salvation simply means help. And then they would pour the water on the altar and look forward to a time when a spiritual water would flow out from Jerusalem, not only enabling the crops to grow, but enabling fullness of life for everyone. Isn't that what we all want? Fullness of life, to live life to the fullest, to experience the richness of life. Despite all the problems and struggles we have, we want real life to flow in us and through us. And so in the midst of this scene, Jesus in John chapter 7 gets up and he stands up where all this water is being lifted up, carried, and poured out, and they're hoping for living water to come. And he says this, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, streams of living water will flow from within him." And so the whole scene is happening with the festival. There's lots of partying going on. This great ceremony of water. And Jesus stands up and says, if you trust in me, if you trust in Jesus, streams of living, you'll have that life that you're yearning for. And so Jesus says that he is the fulfillment of their hope for water, in both an immediate way and in a long-term future way. This water that comes to us, Jesus named as his own presence that would come to us spiritually by the Holy Spirit. And this life enables us to develop in our relationships, to experience healing where there's strife, to experience growth where there's been decay. Just think about those areas of your life where you wish would be a little bit more alive, a little bit more dynamic, that you'd like to see some growth. And Jesus is saying he's the one who can provide that. So that's water. Let's now talk about the other major element of the feast, fire, which gives light. Now, the same prophet Zechariah who spoke